Robin's house, way too many rules. You'd have to knock on the door and wait for someone to come to the door and answer it. The safest role for me.
One source reports, the instant Kody Brown's gaze fell on that person, his face might have sliced glass. The figure before him wasn't attached to assets, wasn't attached to real estate value. It was attached to an eye-popping $2 million in debt. Not a single penny of wiggle room, no loophole to slide into, no ability to hide it under spin or half-truths.
It was his way, otherwise he would talk to you about it ad nauseum forever and gave in. And I'm like, why can't I just write my own freaking check?
It arrived in the form of cold, hard, formal loan documents. Unspinnable, irrefutable, and that was the ignition. Witnesses claim he transitioned in seconds from a loaded, heavy silence to a volcanic outburst pacing the floor, cutting the air with his hands, barking orders to know exactly who had signed what and when.
That he had grandchildren, that he was a cool dad. I felt like he was trying to prove to her that he was a stand-up guy, and I didn't know why specifically.
The magnitude of the debt had taken him by surprise, but what hurt more was Christine, sitting there completely unruffled, and yes, slightly amused. She reclined in her chair, folding her arms, the slight pull of a smile distorting her lips before letting fall the bombshell that would create waves in every arm of the Brown family gossip chain. Math doesn't lie. People familiar with the situation say Christine had been monitoring the family's real estate transactions for years before the standoff, biding her time for the day when Kody would have to confront reality without his customary pillows of justification. She didn't shout, didn't point a finger in accusation. She just put down the numbers one by one, allowing their cold, heavy reality to speak for themselves. But Kody wasn't listening. Phrases like betrayal and setup allegedly flew from his lips. His anger was not so much about the debt, it was about optics. $2 million in the red was embarrassing questions from the family, from fans, and possibly even from creditors. And what if it was Christine who blabbed the numbers, either intentionally or through a discreetly placed friend? Just thinking about that was driving him crazy. And this was the worst part. This was no ordinary property transaction. It was supposedly attached to Robin's home, the favorite wife's headquarters, which equated to each of the dollars of that loan being able to be framed as just another instance of shared family resources being directed to one branch a heck of a lot more generously than the others. For Kody, that was poison. For Christine, it was evidence. While he was raging, she remained firm, her tone calm, her message firm. The figures were the figures, and no furious yelling could possibly alter them. But if Kody was under the impression that the loan was the bombshell, he was mistaken. It was merely the prelude. Christine's second bombshell would render $2 million a mere appetizer before the feast. For years, she'd been written off as emotional, as the wife who fought back in anger rather than thinking 10 steps ahead. But those who knew her best say that this couldn't be farther from the truth. If anything, decades living in the Brown home had led her to learn that patience could be far more deadly than any eruptive flash of rage. Long before Kody's booming voice echoed over that notorious number, Christine had been quietly following the breadcrumbs along. She wasn't snooping. She wasn't plotting. She was just paying attention. And in a big family with money mingled like an overpacked filing cabinet, paying attention meant noticing everything. Who was signing which checks, which bills mysteriously stuck, which somehow continued to be flush even when the rest of the family was instructed to tighten their belts. Based on sources, Christine commenced her own private audit years prior to departing Kody. No suited accountants, no subpoenas, just writing things down, hiding printouts, taking rapid photos of statements as they moved over the kitchen counter. She heard when the children talked about yet another package to Robin's residence, or when a large payment came through on the verge of a holiday. As time went by, the small morsels created an identifiable image. And in Christine's version, the conclusion wasn't going to be gentle towards Kody or his fourth wife. One source likened her patience as unsettling. She never slammed down bills or created a scene. She simply waited, like a chess champion waiting to make checkmate move until just the right moment. That moment arrived when the mortgage documents were too public to hide. A $2 million home loan on Robin's behalf, with signatures said to link it to joint family assets, wasn't a smoking gun. It was the last piece of the puzzle falling into place. Kody, on his part, was secretly asserting Christine was trying to sway her guilt by projecting him as the bad guy, asserting to others that she needed to portray him as a bad man in order to seek out someone else who would trust her. To him, departing a good man would scare off other potential suitors. But Christine didn't require theatrics. She merely had to lay that loan alongside the family's current obligations and let the numbers speak. Kody perceived it as a sword intended to humiliate. She perceived it as bringing shining light into a corner that had been in darkness for far too long. The Robin connection hurt all the more, particularly with an increasing sense among the older kids that her home drew from the shared pot more frequently and in considerably greater amounts than anybody else's. Extravagant Christmases here, spontaneous shopping sprees there, and now a $2 million loan. Christine's records left no doubt about the implication. This was not an isolated incident, it was a trend. And then there was the part that became intensely personal. Reports say she had evidence indicating communal funds were spent not just on that mortgage, but also on property taxes, home improvements, and lavish interior design. Not a thing that was criminal, nothing that would attract outside powers, but enough to raise very serious ethical questions in a family where every dollar was supposed to count the same for everyone. And in a family like this, moral issues might be as debilitating as legal ones. So when Kody overheard Christine mention the $2 million amount, it was not only about debt, it was about the narrative that number conveyed. A narrative in which his choices could be considered reckless, selfish, or both. Christine knew just how to let that narrative simmer. But what Kody did not know was that his math was not even the worst card in her deck. She had something else. Something that would blow the whole family situation. A detail so weighted that even a whisper of it would turn the house against him. If the $2 million loan was a grenade, this next piece of information was dynamite. And Christine had been keeping the match lit for years. The room was choking. Kody striding, arms folded, Robin with that deer-in-headlights, pursed lip expression she always had when backed into a corner. Christine's tone, though, was serene, almost soothing, as if reading a bedtime story and not tearing apart the monetary tale Kody had created. She started with a word, transfers, and the atmosphere changed. Transfers could be anything from grocery store money transferred between accounts to enormous cash movements for big purchase items. Christine said she'd followed some of them for the last couple of years, none of which had ever made it into the family's budget sessions. Her voice remained playful, but every sentence weighed heavier on Kody's conscience. And then she said it, PayPal. Not because PayPal itself was problematic, but because everyone in the room understood that it was a quick, clandestine means of transferring funds without being too overt about it. Christine asserted she had followed almost $597,000 through the PayPal account associated with an unknown name attributed to a small LLC in Flagstaff. On paper, it was for event coordination and household management services. There were no events, no clients, no outward signs of operations. There were, however, purchases, nothing short of luxury furniture to private school bills. Christine didn't outright accuse anyone, but the gaze she held on Robin lingered just long enough to make the subtext of deafening volumes. Kody broke first, his voice rising high, protesting the entire thing as irrelevant and misinterpreted. Christine didn't blink. She fanned out her notes like receipts on a kitchen counter, taking the room step by step through how she had aligned PayPal timestamps with delivery dates and unexpected expense surges in the Robin household. The news was unmistakable. Community funds had been channeled through a personal pipeline that disproportionately favored one line of the family tree. The older children didn't even attempt to suppress their reactions. One grumbling, "Mom always said," another rolling their eyes so hard it sounded almost audible. This was no longer about money. This was about years of quiet complaints finally coalescing into something irrefutable. The moment was thick enough to slice. Christine had been laying out her points like pins on a map, methodical, deliberate, each one driving home a location in a story that was starting to look a lot less like fun in the sun, and a lot more like a storm rolling in. Robin's voice trembled, her tone wavering between defensiveness and incredulity. She maintained that if money had shifted, it was for reasons approved by the family. She attempted to infuse it with authority, but the cracks in her tone were difficult to ignore. Christine's smooth, measured response cut through it like glass. If it was approved, why hadn't it been discussed? That was the pin that burst Kody's composure. In a blink of an eye, he moved from rigid denial to outright accusation. He labeled Christine vindictive, accused her of trying to destroy him financially on purpose, and worst of all, doing it in front of the children. Christine didn't blink. She didn't raise her voice. Her tone remained flat, as if she was reprimanding a child. You call it destruction. I call it transparency. The room changed. The children bent in involuntarily, sensing something greater on the horizon. And Christine made it pay for them. Not all of it, just a look. She made a suggestion that the PayPal trail they'd been analyzing wasn't even the complete picture. It was the middle layer of an enormously larger financial cake. The icing on top? Assets no one had ever spoken of before. She allowed the silence to linger, just long enough to allow the gravity to sink in, then leaned forward, fingers interlocked, and deposited it. I didn't want to mention this without evidence, but now I have the evidence. Property records, public, searchable, irrefutable. Christine described how she had been quietly reviewing the county assessor's database for years. Initially, just to monitor the family's land holdings. But gradually, she began noticing names and entities belonging to Kody and Robyn that had never once been included on the family's formal asset register. And then came the piece of information that weighted the air. A 3-bedroom holiday cabin in Sedona, purchased outright, no mortgage, in the name of a trust associated with one of Robyn's relatives. Kody clenched his jaw, but Christine didn't stop. She asserted the PayPal withdrawals matched up exactly with the purchase, down to a cashier's check written during the week of the sale. "It's amusing how dates fall together when you begin paying attention," she said quietly, and she wasn't finished. From her purse, she produced a battered, thin folder. She pushed it across the table. Contents: receipts and screenshots for high-end goods, all delivered to a Flagstaff P.O. box. Designer purses, expensive electronics, a one-of-a-kind dining table that costs more than some cars. Each purchase supposedly funneled through the same LLC Christine had already linked to Robyn. Robyn had shaken her head, in near unison, insisting they were gifts or home investments. Christine would not let it go. "Those investments are for the family. Not one branch to spoil while the rest struggle." One of the children finally ended the silence. Was that why there hadn't been money for land payments a few years ago? Kody snapped that the two things were unrelated, but his voice cracked just enough to make everyone wonder if he believed it himself. Then Christine played her trump card. A grainy but unmistakable picture of Kody at a high-end SUV dealership, pen hovering over forms. The car, she explained, wasn't in his name. It was being held by the same trust that owned the Sedona cabin. And the buy? Days after he'd informed the family they had to tighten belts and reduce. The room grew colder. It wasn't about money anymore. This was about trust. Decades of carefully groomed composure being disentangled before our very eyes. Christine reclined in her chair, a faint smile on her face. If you think that's all, you're not prepared for what's coming next. The next surprise wasn't about concealed assets. It was about where it was concealed. Christine said she'd become proficient in reading incorporation records and public business filings. She said she'd discovered at least 3 LLCs formed in the past 4 years, none of which showed up on the family's joint asset listing. Red flag number 1, each and every one of the managers named in those records was connected to Robyn's extended family or longtime business associates, not Kody, nor Robyn. The second, they were registered in states known to have lax corporate disclosure laws. And then her voice went lower. One of them isn't even registered in the US. It's in Belize. That word fell like an unexploded grenade. Kody scoffed, dismissed it as paranoia. Christine didn't flinch. She unfolded paperwork connecting one of the LLCs to a string of huge, silky smooth wire transfers, the sort accountants employ in order to balance the books. She followed the trail. LLC to PayPal high-end purchases and real estate transactions. Robyn went pale. She grunted something about private investors and business opportunities. Christine rolled right past her. She revealed parcels of raw land bought under the name of a shell company, dissolved less than a year later. And the purchase dates? They matched the sale of one of the family's old Utah properties, a sale Kody had publicly claimed barely broke even. Piece by piece, the puzzle was coming together, and the picture was dark. Then came the line that froze even the kids mid-breath. If half of what I'm seeing is accurate, this money wasn't just diverted. It may have been moved in ways that could draw IRS attention. She clarified she wasn't accusing anyone of a crime, yet. But the patterns, she said, would make any auditor salivate. Kody slapped his hand on the table, accusing her of turning the children against him. But it was done. Christine closed the folder, let the silence grow, and then dropped one final dagger. If you think the IRS is intimidating, wait until you hear what the state's been inquiring about. Even Kody sat back a little at that. Christine let the quiet settle, long enough for everyone to feel it. She wasn't bluffing. Before anybody could cut in, Christine drew an envelope out of her folder, her movements slow, as if she sensed this was the moment that would cause the air in the room to become denser. This, she pushed it into the middle of the table, is not from the IRS. It's from the Arizona Department of Revenue. Her voice was maddeningly even, but her gaze clamped onto Kody's face, sweeping over him for even the slightest flicker of guilt. The envelope was plain, just plain white with the small plastic window for the address. But it may as well have been a bomb ready to go off. Robin reached out to take it instinctively, but Christine's hand beat her to it. "You can read it later," she said coolly. "For now, I'll summarize." On the surface, it was nothing more than a routine notice about discrepancies in reported income for a certain tax year. Initially, Christine had believed that it was a clerical error, until she realized the year in question coincided approximately with one of the large property sales, and supposedly with one of those mystery LLC transfers that she had just revealed moments before. Her voice lowered even further, making everyone eavesdrop. "The state doesn't mail letters like this unless there is something there," she told them. "Something in the documents triggered a wire. They're not trying to fish. He already has the numbers. Now they just want to determine if Kody's tale is different from the one they already have." Kody settled back, arms folded, expression impassive, but his jaw clenched. A small betrayal beneath an otherwise mask of serenity. Robin leapt in, quick and on the defensive, proposing perhaps it was a typo, an incorrect social security number, a paperwork anomaly. Christine curled a slow, knowing smile. Not cruel, simply the sort of smile you flash when you've witnessed too much to accept a handy alibi. "If it's only a mistake," she said calmly, "then you've got nothing to lose. But timing doesn't lie." Then she slapped them with the second blow. A second letter, 2 months later, not to Kody, but to one of the LLCs. And the clincher? The registered agent was the very same cousin of Robin's who'd already been associated with 2 other shell companies. Christine's voice flattened out. Matter of fact, that's a pattern. And patterns like that get state investigators asking why the same family name keeps popping up in the same suspicious paperwork. The room fell silent. The tick of the hallway clock. Nobody needed to say it aloud. Once detectives begin tugging on a thread, they don't stop at 1 year or one testimony. They tug until the whole thing comes undone. Kody attempted to steer discussion toward the notion that the family had always been misunderstood by outsiders. But Christine did not intend to let him take the wheel again. She sat forward, her tone biting. "If you consider this is all about taxes, what's coming next makes the whole thing seem like pocket change. No foreplay, no drama." She opened her folder and set on the table a spare pile of photocopied deeds and bank records, all bearing the same date. "I didn't even know I was looking for this," she said, poking the stack. "I stumbled upon it, rummaging through parcel numbers for Coyote Pass. One of those," she said, pointed to an entirely different parcel, 40 miles outside of Flagstaff. Not a little piece of land. Acreage. Purchased in cash. And the next day, a loan against it for $2 million. Even Mary, who had been sitting delicately in the middle, shifted uncomfortably at that. Christine laid out the papers so the dates fell into neat alignment. Buy one day, borrow the next. The lender? Not your run-of-the-mill bank. Private equity out of Phoenix. High interest, short term. The kind you take when you don't want a bank making a big fuss. Robin interrupted once more. "That doesn't make it unethical," she countered. "Lots of people use private loans to avoid bank bureaucracy." Christine shook her head once. "Of course, but when those loan dates coincide perfectly with deposits into the LLC account we discussed earlier, and then big pieces of that money begin vanishing in out-of-state transfers, that's not family bills. That's not taxes. That's something else." Her words fell like a scalpel. $2 million isn't the sort of number you lose. And then the dagger. Math doesn't lie. And when you borrow that amount of money, you owe somebody an explanation. Because the repayments alone could consume more than our family's annual income. Kody finally leaned in, his voice low and angry. "You have no idea what that money was used for." Christine didn't blink. "You're right. I don't know everything. But I do know we weren't all informed this property even existed. None of us signed off on that loan. And yet, the payments are coming from accounts held by all of us. So we're all stuck, whether we want to be or not." Mary's voice sliced through the tension like glass. "And what if the holder of that loan decides they want their money sooner than they thought?" Christine gave a brief, humorless laugh. "Then they take the property. And if the collateral has anything else in that LLC, they take that as well. That's how these lenders are. They don't tarry. They act quickly, and they take whatever they can lay hands on." Its weight was crushing. The existence of a hidden $2 million loan wasn't merely scandal. It was a live grenade that might destroy more than one property. And Christine wasn't finished yet. She allowed the silence to hang, then played her final card. I also discovered something in the lender's reports. Something related to a name I think you won't want to hear. She didn't hurry. She allowed the tension to build until everyone caught themselves holding their breath. Then she pushed one final page over the table. The print was light, but the letterhead readable. Glenn Harkness. The response was immediate. Mary blinked, mouth opening as if she'd speak, then reconsidered. Kody's jaw worked, a vein thudding at his temple. Robin's mask of serenity splintered just enough to flash something. Recognition, perhaps even terror. Christine caught it immediately. Oh, so that name means something? For those who didn't know, Glenn Harkness wasn't just another faceless investor. His wealth was commercial real estate, but his reputation, that was forged in shadows. He was a fixer, the kind of person people called when they needed a deal rammed through that no bank would touch, or when assets needed to be moved quietly. No charges, no convictions. But his string of transactions was not one to be followed again. Christine's tone remained calm, but every sentence landed like a punch. Harkness has a reputation for arranging loans so he can take collateral from more than one party. Just the party signing on the dotted line, not necessarily. If he determines this property isn't sufficient to pay his stake, he can move on anything that's attached to that LLC, Coyote Pass included. Robin had had enough. That's not going to happen. Glenn's a friend. He knows that this is a long-term situation. Christine interrupted her with one raised hand. The ensuing silence was movie-like. The precise moment a secret crisis went public. They all understood the reality deep in their guts. You can't follow the money without following the truth. All the way back to the person who was truly behind this. And now, the question wasn't if the family could ride out the hit. It was if Kody could endure the narrative others were about to create, with no fear of articulating the quiet part loud. So, what do you guys think? Is Kody just riding through a storm he believes he can talk his way out of? Or is this the point his empire finally ends? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Give that like button, and stick with us because you won't believe what's about to happen next.